You know, I will tell you the best gift you can give to anybody in a moment and why it's more important than you may know. Humour me for a moment here. You know, think back over this year and ask yourself one question. What was your favourite day of 2025? You know, when you really think about it, was it that day you unboxed that new lithium battery? Or maybe you got your new power station or your new portable coffee machine? Probably not. But it may be that morning that you parked up somewhere nice and quiet. You had a brew with a view, which you'd never seen before. Or maybe it was that night where everything went absolutely wrong and then you laughed about it until the early hours of the morning. You know, we live in a world now that's currently all about the gifts. Discounts here, discounts there, Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday deals. The algorithms are screaming at us to buy the top 10 gadgets, the top 10 campervan deals of 2025, the best campervan gifts, the Christmas gifts for van lifers. But as campervan owners, I think we know something that most people don't. We know that the best things in life aren't necessarily wrapped in paper. So today, I'm not going to be giving you that shopping list. I'm not going to be trying to sell you any gadgets or anything. I've done that for the last few years now, and there are going to be some channels which will be doing that this year, I'm sure. You know, there is not going to be any affiliate links here. And there's nothing wrong with those. Like I've said, I have done them before. But this video is actually something that does come from the heart due to recent events. You know, today I'm going to be talking about the gifts that actually matter, including a huge one. You know, the ones that don't fill up your precious cupboard space in your camper van, but actually fulfill your life. You know, this hasn't been an easy year in many respects for both health and wealth, but it's the response to these things that can make or break us, and more about that in a moment. You know, you might remember my bucket list trip to Spain. On paper, it was a total disaster. We got caught up in the worst flood that Seville had ever seen, until actually 2 weeks later and it happened again. You know, the trains were cancelled and we were stranded 150 kilometres from where we needed to be. You know, it was wet, it was stressful, and it cost an absolute fortune in taxi fares back. But looking back at the photos now, and actually being safe at home, then that trip is the trip which I talk about. You know, I don't remember what raincoat I was wearing, or what technology I was using or anything like that, what bottle I had in my bag. But I do remember being there. I remember that feeling of actually being there and having to try and solve those problems and seeing Seville for the beautiful place that it was. You know, and then when we got to Caminito del Rey, I saw something that completely reiterated exactly what I often say. You know, I saw all these camper vans driving around, and also the ones which were parked in the car park, and some of them were old, rusty and battered. But the people inside them, they were seeing the exact same views that the people were in the £100,000 motorhomes. We can spend so much of our lives and our money as well trying to make our vans perfect. We buy the gifts, the gadgets, the upgrades, trying to build that perfect camper. You know, and some people will actually wait until it's finished before even starting their adventures. Or perhaps those people who are, I'm waiting to retire and then I'm going to buy a camper van. Well, there's a famous book by the palliative care nurse, Bronnie Ware, and the book was called The Top 5 Regrets of Dying. You know, and she spent years with people in the final weeks of their lives. And while she was with them, she asked what they would do differently. And nobody, not one single person said, I wish I'd bought more stuff. But the number 2 regret was, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So when we're there working all hours that God sends, do we really need to? Or could we be doing something else? Could we have that work-life balance a little bit better than it is? Yeah, I for one do fall into that category. And then the number 1 regret was, I wish I had the courage to live a true life to myself. You know, in the UK, we are living a lot longer now, but our health span, you know, the years where we're actually active and mobile, is shorter than we think. You know, it may be great to live to an old age, but for that period in our latter lives, then are we really able to do that, the things we want to dream of? Will we be able to climb mountains? when we're 90 years old? No, we probably won't be. So what is stopping us from doing it now? I think a lot of us are trapped by perfection. We think we can't go until the van is finished. We think we can't go because we don't have that shower installed, or the heating isn't right. Or maybe we think that we can't afford the camper that we want. But the truth is, the outdoors doesn't care what you sleep in. If you don't have a camper van yet, well, put a mattress in the back of your car, drive to a campsite. It might not be that Instagram perfect camper van you've been dreaming of, but you're going to be waking up in the exact same place as the man in his £100,000 motorhome, or even £150,000, £200,000 motorhome. Start with a basic van, throw that sleeping bag in the back, and just improve it later. We discussed this in that recent video where we talked about the campervan market. Start with a base, figure out actually what you really need the van for. Hire a camper, see if it's right for you. Just start basic and just get out there and experience it. The biggest waste of money isn't a cheap van. It's a fully kitted out camper van that's sitting on your driveway for 50 weeks of the year without it going anywhere. Don't let your van become a driveway ornament. Take the opportunities to get out and about whenever you can. Even if it is just for that one night, even if it's imperfect, you wouldn't believe how much better you feel after one night. So this Christmas, let's focus on the gifts that remove the excuses. I will tell you the best gift you can give to anybody in a moment, and why it's more important than you may know. But before that, if you want to help someone get out more, or perhaps even yourself, there's a few things you can do. A reason people don't get out much, it could be the money. Where can they go? Where can they find somewhere where it's safe? Where can they park? Well, you could help them with this. And there are a couple of simple ideas. You could get a coastal paths book, a guide to the 100 places to paddleboard in the southwest, which I've got. Robbie Rome's has got an absolute load of range of books, including this guide for dog-friendly weekends away. Or maybe you could give them access to the Brit stops so they can find those free park-ups at pubs, restaurants and farms. Or maybe a National Trust membership. You aren't just giving access to old houses, you're giving free, safe parking in some of the most stunning parts of the UK. And some now even allow overnight stays, so you can stay overnight in your camper van. But even without the stays, you're giving them a destination for that Sunday morning drive. It doesn't even have to be a Sunday, it can be any day. Open those doors to adventure by removing the excuses. Another excuse which, some people might have, it might be that the lack of confidence in driving. They thought that it was a great idea to get that camper van or motorhome, but actually the step up from the small car which they had was a bit bigger than they thought. In which case you could look at manoeuvrability course, help them get that confidence. And also, like I said last week, you could even give it a try at the NEC show in February. This could also be good for maybe a partner perhaps. If they're not comfortable in driving the van, then giving that partner that confidence to take the wheel, then suddenly you aren't a driver and a passenger like I currently am. You're a team, both of you, you can both drive. If one of you don't feel like driving, I don't feel like it today, the other one can. It just gives you that greater opportunity to get out. Now those are just some practical gifts, but it's this third gift. This is the real one. This is the one that really matters, especially now more than ever. Now times are tough. But before I come on to that, I will explain why it's also important. There was a report done, the Enjoyment Report, and it was a major study done by Liverpool John Moores University, as well as the Caravan and Camping Club. They wanted to find out why we actually do this. Why do we sleep in a tiny box on wheels, often in wet, windy conditions which aren't very favourable, certainly not glamorous situations? But the results were incredible. They found that 23% were less anxious than non-campers. There was 44% of campers were flourishing, which means that they have optimal mental health. And 97% said that happiness was their main motivator. Think about that. In a world where the cost of living is quite frankly frightening, you know, we're all struggling in some way. So that simple act of taking somebody into the outdoors is actually medicine. You know, before work actually this morning, I did go for a walk. You know, I parked up in the car park and I thought, no, I'm going to go for a walk this morning. And I admired the amazing sunlight breaking through the clouds, the beams of light coming down to Drake's Island. You know, breathing in that fresh air, peaceful and quiet. I felt good before my day even began. You know, I felt calm and relaxed, even whilst I was trying to process the awful news which I'd heard the day before. You know, it is amazing how something just completely so simple can help you cope. And that news is actually what leads me on to the greatest gift that you can give your family, your friends, your partner. You know, it isn't a gadget. You know, that gift is you. It is your time. It is spending time with the people that mean the most to you. It's saying, I'm going to turn off my phone. We're going to drive to a muddy field. We're going to camp out and we're just going to be there together. Or we're going to go for a walk, or we're going to do something in a forest, or we're going to go, sounds a bit dodgy, or we're going to go to the beach. We're going to breathe in that fresh air. The Outjoyment report proves that what we really crave isn't stuff. You know, it's to feel relaxed, connected and happy. You know, the van is just that, you know, method of getting somewhere. The actual gift is the time which you spend inside it. You know, it's more than that though. You know, how many times at Christmas do we think, I've had an amazing day today with the family, playing those board games, having a laugh at Uncle Bob who was trying to act out something in charades and got it completely wrong. You know, we love the day and the time which we spent. Yet we won't do it again for another year. But yet we keep saying, oh, we should do this again, we should do it more often. Well, instead of saying it, just do it. You should do it. You know, when you have a get together, oh, I've not seen you for so long, it's been brilliant. Well, plan it, do it. So here's my challenge to you this Christmas. You know, if you're struggling with what to buy, or maybe money is tight so you can't afford to buy much anyway, don't buy anything. You know, write a card, plan out a trip and book it. You know, even if it's only very, very local, it doesn't matter. Just get out. You know, spend time with the people which we care about. Don't just say, we must catch up. Say, this is the day which we're going to catch up and we're going to go. We must do coffee. Yeah, okay. Well, this is the day we're going to do coffee. You know, we do not know what's around the corner. Do it now whilst, you know, we still can. Because when we're old and we're kind of not been able to get around so much, we're not going to be sitting there thinking, oh yeah, I remember that upgrade I did. You know, we're not going to remembering, oh yeah, that material thing was amazing. We'll remember the time we got stranded in that flood in Spain and laughed about it. We'll remember the sunsets. We'll remember the people. You know, I remember this year, I absolutely loved walking down the steps of the Paramporth Beach at Easter. In the wind and the rain, it was pouring down. And I also remember having a great experience at Bude when everybody else decided to go to Bude as well. It was ram-packed, but the sun was beaming. I remember having chips, sausage, peas and gravy on a park bench. It was a beautiful day. But I won't remember what I bought this year. Well, I might remember my ride of 20 because that's actually going to be giving me part of my adventures, allowing me to get out and, yeah, hopefully lose a bit of this weight. I love speaking to you lovely people at the NEC show, and as such, I didn't actually do half the filming which I needed to do. So this year, rather than not talking to as many people, which I wouldn't be able to do that anyway, you know, I'm actually going to be going up there for 3 days instead, so I can speak to as many people as I want, and hopefully get all my filming done as well. You know, I'd love to know what was your favourite moment of 2025. What memorable trips have you been on? And what have you got planned for 2026? Let me know in the comments. And next year I will have loads more of the campervan chats, which I've absolutely loved doing. And you can see the last one which I did here about the current campervan industry. Thanks for watching, take care, and I hope to see you soon.